An introduction to emotional eating. Very, very important topic, and one that people often overlook on their goals to becoming a better, healthier version of themselves. Okay, and particularly when it comes to things like fat loss, people are thinking about the basics around nutrition, around just moving more, eating less. Okay, but a lot of the time they're not succeeding because they're not nailing things like this here and having a true understanding of what emotional eating is and how it affects your journey moving forward. Okay, so very simply, really easy quote there to remember. The tendency to increase food consumption in order to modify negative emotional states. Basically, you're feeling like crap and you reach for food to get that little bit of a buzz and you feel better temporarily, okay? And that's essentially what that means to have to try to combat some negative emotional feelings, okay? So here is kind of what we call the restriction cycle, okay? And what very often happens when it comes to emotional eating and getting results. So we start off when we go in towards we're trying to do a new weight loss plan or whatever, and we go into an area of restriction. Okay, so restriction may be just cutting out some of your favorite foods. Okay, then something happens, there's a hunger and an emotional trigger, and then you actually, because you've cut it out, you're craving that, and then you something triggers and you actually go and binge on it or overeat it. Okay, and then that flips into feelings of guilt, feelings of shame. Why did you do that again? What have I done? I've ruined everything. And then you just flip it back to, you know what, I'm going to get back on track tomorrow. And you overly restrict again. And then it's that vicious cycle, okay? And a lot of this might be, say, relating to you, things like weekends, Monday to Friday, and then weekends. You've had a tough, busy week at work. You're emotionally drained. Friday evening comes, you're reaching for that glass of wine. It goes into the weekend, it goes into Saturday, Sunday, and you go, I'm going to get back on track Monday. You're feeling like crap, you're feeling a bit shitty about yourself, and Monday comes, you overly restricted, and the same thing happens again following Friday. You've overly restricted, and you binge out on that food that you've so craved. So here's what we actually want to do with the restriction cycle, okay? So once we are, say, maybe cutting back in calories, we're not overly restricted, but we are reducing our calorie intake, but we're not cutting out our favorite foods. We need to have nutritional strategies um, in play that whenever these triggers do happen, okay, because no matter what, even if you're restricting or not restricting, these triggers will still happen. We're still going to get emotionally stressed. Things are going to happen that we want to actually binge out, okay? So we have to have a more of an emotional regulation and awareness of what's going on as well, okay? Then when it comes to the binging, overeating stages, and you recognize things and you're emotionally more aware, you have in the moment strategies already set up. So you understand the nutrition strategies around hunger and emotional triggers. That's involved in having better strategies. Then you've also got strategies in place for when you may have binged in the past, but these new strategies will allow you not to overly binge. And then when it does come to the point of maybe you have gone overboard, you're not going to kill yourself better. Okay, you're not going to feel overly bad. Maybe just shit happens and just move it on. Okay, right? And you're going to have a bit of self-compassion. These are the sort of things we want to move towards now as we move forward. Okay, so this is a very, very important point here, okay? So the development of our emotional eating behaviors, these are the key elements here. Okay, I'm going to move this thing out of the way so we can see where we're at. Apologies now, folks. There we go. Good. So the type of food we eat is often what complicates our behaviors further, okay? So the type of food we eat, so if we're eating really, really clean, as per se, okay, what might happen is you may have cut out all your sweet stuff, you may have cut out alcohol, you may have cut out bread, you may have cut out X, Y, and Z. That can actually complicate things further and make the journey harder, okay? And then you may actually just overindulge in all of those things and may go started, okay? And as point number two, very, very evidently shows, we don't ever reach for a banana or a piece of broccoli or a few strawberries when we're feeling crap. We will go for those hyper palatable foods, the foods that are tasty, the foods that have got the excess sugar, the added flavorings, etc. Okay, that make us want them even more. Okay, and we often deem these foods as being unhealthy, and therefore we feel crapper about eating them thereafter. Okay, but number four is a very, very good point. These feelings that you get from food are only temporary, okay? They are not there for the long term. They are not going to solve your solution. They are not going to solve your problems, okay? They're going to give you a quick hit, but then that's going to drop back down again. And that's often why we binge. We want more and more and more. But that's not actually going to help you folks, to be honest, moving forward. And as I said, point number 5, very, very obvious. And then point number 6, sorry, I misspelled number there. Point number 6 is that we flip the cycle back around and we start again, we overly restrict, and then something happens and we binge. We don't want to go near that, okay? So we've got to find better balance, better strategies in place. So does this sound familiar to you? Does the binge eating, does the SOTA technique, does it the feelings of guilty thereafter, do they resonate with you? And if they do, what can you take from this to actually make changes going forward? Okay, now that you have a bit more of an understanding of actually, you know what, I can relate to that. What I can actually start to put solutions in. I've got control over this. What can I do to make those changes going forward? So emotional regulation is very, very important, okay? And how are we going to do that? First and foremost, we've got to identify, okay? We've got to identify the feelings, thoughts, and physical sensations. If we know that we commonly have this issue of emotional eating and we're constantly breaking down and we're just binge eating or whatever it might be, let's take that a step back further and actually try to figure out what are the feelings, what are the thoughts and physical sensations that lead us, so we're becoming more emotionally aware of what actually these triggers are, okay? And can we combat them before they actually happen, okay? Minimizing judgment, being more compassionate to yourself, okay? Minimizing everything, maybe minimizing the amount of food you have in the house, minimizing whatever you might have. But at the end of the day, shit happens. We all fall off the wagon as such, okay? But at the end of the day, like, if you're getting that balanced approach, there's no necessarily offer on the wagon anyway. There's no necessarily good versus bad, as you've mentioned before, okay? It's all about just balance and trying to be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more controlled. So instead of restricting everything out of your diet, maybe keep those smaller bits in your nutrition plan and in your strategy, so that when you do feel like you're reaching for something, if you've had a bit of a trigger, then at least you know it's part of your overall plan anyway, and then you've no need to be judgmental about yourself. You've no need to kill yourself over it, okay? Because it is already part of your process anyway, okay? So that's one way to see it. Don't cut it out. Just be more disciplined, but still have it in there. Maybe a glass of wine, maybe a piece of chocolate, whatever it might be, okay? And then responding is absolutely crucial. How you respond to adversity and how you respond to these challenges will dictate how well you do going forward. And by responding, it could mean pre-identifying these things that happen and having responses ready to go. Like, do you have, instead of having loads of sweets in the cupboard, okay, do you have 1 or 2 little mini bars of chocolate? You may say, listen, if something happens, I'm going to have one of those little mini snack bars and I'm preparing for that, okay? And have them there ready to go, if that makes sense. So we finish up with this here. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom, okay? No matter what happens to you, we have the ability to choose how we respond to that, okay? Very often we take the negative emotional response, okay, and we reach for the food, we reach those things that are not actually going to help us, okay? Now let's try and flip that there and think about, well, I am in control of my response. I can control how I feel and how I react to things. Am I always going to be, say, going with that victim approach whereby I reach for the crappy foods and I feel sorry for myself? Or am I going to take a learning from this and try to make better choices moving forward and try to prepare better for situations that are before they arise, okay? So listen, we have the choice, we have the power of choice. So the best thing I can sort of advise you to do is go away, have a think about your own emotional eating status, how you're normally affected when stress arises and triggers arise, and then what you can start to do now moving forward to help combat these things when they do arise again. There's no point saying that they're not going to arise again, because that's not going to happen. These things will happen again. There will be stressful occasions. Shit happens to every single person every week of their lives. But how are you going to deal with that, folks? And is it going to be reaching for the food? That's not going to help you with the results. Or is it going to be getting out for a walk? Or is it going to be choosing a different response? I hope that makes sense, folks. And I'm looking forward to talking you through more emotional eating